I wanted to take a couple minutes and show you some of the effects that are located under the Generate category in After Effects. There are some really interesting things that you can use to enhance your projects and even to create really cool backgrounds. So let's take a look. Here I have a composition and I have a solid. I also brought in a video so I can show you a couple things on video as well as a sound file. So we'll be looking at these as we go through the effects. I'm going to go into Effects and Preset, and as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at the Generate category. There are quite a few effects within this category. I'm not going to cover all of them, but I will show you some of them and let you know how you can use them in your projects. Some of these are really great ways that you can easily create just an interesting background that you can animate, and it'll give you a good starting point, especially if you're dealing with text or something where you might want a little bit of a texture behind those elements. I'm going to start off by using the 4-color gradient, and when we drag this onto our screen, you can see that we get a gradient. Each of these targets right here allow you to control the position of the color, and obviously you can come over here and customize all of the color settings. So if you wanted to change any of these, you could go ahead and alter them and set them to be any particular hue that you want and fully customize the look of the gradient. If you combine this effect with a blending mode, this can create some really nice effects with underlying elements. This obviously is not going to be too obvious on my solid, but if I go ahead and take this effect and apply it to my video file and then use a blending mode, you'll see how I can add a color effect over my video, and obviously all of these things are keyframeable. I'm just going to remove that from the video file, and we'll go back to our solid for right now, and we'll remove this from the solid as well. The next effect is the advanced lightning, and this is just a quick way that you can create lightning. You'll apply it to a solid, and obviously most of the solid will become transparent, and then there's all kinds of different things that you can animate in regards to how this looks. If you want to control the colors, you can go into the glow settings and you can set this to any shade that you want and fully customize the lightning. So that's a real quick way that you can make pretty easy lightning. The next two settings, the audio spectrum and audio waveform, will analyze the project's audio and they will create a waveform. I will turn off my Bat-Ray movie because it has some audio, and if we go ahead and just play this, you can hear that I have some music. That's the All That MP3. And if we get the audio spectrum and drag this to the solid, we'll need to go to the effect controls, and under the audio spectrum, we'll want to go ahead and specify where we want the source to be. So I'm going to put the source on the All That audio file, and you can see I now have a little pink line right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and increase my height, so this is a little bit more apparent. And let's increase the thickness slightly. And now if I play my composition, you can see how this effect is going to interact with the audio. So this is real quick, easy to do, and it can create some really interesting types of effects. I'll go ahead and delete that. We'll move on to the audio waveform. This really acts very similarly, except that instead of using a spectrum, we're going to have more of a traditional waveform. And once again, I'll just up the thickness and we'll up the height a little bit. And then if I play the composition, okay, so you get the idea there. I'll go ahead and delete this. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and use a beam. Beam just creates a beam. It's kind of like a lightsaber type of beam or a laser bolt, and you can go ahead and control all sorts of things: the starting point, the ending point, the length of it, how long you want it to be on the screen, the thickness, the colors, all that kind of good stuff. The next effect we're going to place on our video file. So I'm going to go back to my video file and I'm going to use the CC glue gun. The CC glue gun is an effect that will allow you to create a brush stroke, and I'm going to make this a little bit thicker, and you can see that the brush takes on my video. And of course this is completely animatable. When we do this, we could animate the position, and you can see that my video would play as it normally would. It almost is like a mask, but we have a lot of other settings in here. We can change the paint style to more wobbly, and we can adjust the settings that we have right here. I'll turn off the audio for both of these layers, and I'll just let this RAM preview for a second. And what this effect does is it encapsulates your video within an orb, and you can control the reflections. It almost makes like a 3D type of bubble. And of course you could animate this, so that might be something kind of cool that you could incorporate. I'm going to delete this. The next effect we're going to go ahead and look at is the CC light rays. If we apply this, you can see that I have a focus point right here. And what this does is it will create a light around wherever this point is. So you can see I can move this point and it's like a little light right here. And we can increase the radius of this light and make it more intense. We can control the shape of the light, so making it more round or square. You can animate all of these things obviously as well. This creates a light that you could use to focus in on something, or if you wanted something to kind of have a glow, this could be a good way to do it. Light sweep just creates a beam of light, and you can animate this so that it is at a different direction, and you can make it kind of sweep across your screen. The next couple of effects I think work really well for backgrounds. We have the CC threads, which will apply a texture to whatever element you put it on. It kind of looks like a 3D fabric, and you can obviously control a bunch of different attributes about this, but it's a nice way to create texturing on a specific element if you just need, like a background type of thing. And we can apply this to a multitude of elements. If we put this on our video, just so you can see what that looks like, you can see how it puts this pattern texture on top of my video, and then my video would still play behind it. If I wanted just to create an interesting type of effect, I could go ahead and apply this sort of effect to my elements, and I can control a bunch of different parameters about it, and it just creates something that is a little different. It's nice for a background type of effect if you're looking for something like that. The next effect is kind of similar, but it creates a cell sort of pattern. This one is a way that you can create a ton of different effects. We have bubbles, crystals, crystalline, plates, all kinds of different types of shapes that you might want to incorporate. And then you can control a bunch of different parameters around the shapes. You can control the angle of them. And again, all of these things are keyframeable. With all of these effects, you're probably just going to have to experiment around with them. But again, this can be a kind of a cool way that you can apply an effect that could be used as a background. And of course, you can animate it. So if you come into any of these settings, you could go ahead and animate any of these specific parameters and come up with something that's kind of unique. And it really is just like a nice background type of effect. If you want to add color, you can combine this with an adjustment layer or any of the other effects that allow you to alter color. So you could combine some of these effects on top of each other to come up with something a little bit different. The checkerboard is going to apply a checkerboard effect, and obviously you have a lot of different ways in which you can control this. The checkerboard effect by default is looking through to my underlying layer. So if I scrub through my timeline, you can see some movement. We can control feather, we can control color, opacity, the blending mode can be altered. So lots of different ways in which you can incorporate this sort of effect into your projects and come up with some pretty unique sorts of effects if you're looking for something like that. Circle is just going to create a circle, and ellipse kind of does the same sort of thing. The eyedropper fill is a way that you can put a color overlay on top of footage. So if we just apply this and we move the sample point, you can see that I can sample different areas. And if we just play our video, you can see that the background is changing. So wherever that sample point is, as my video plays, it's going to alter the background. This can just create a changing background based on some underlying footage that you might apply it to. Fill is just another way that we can create a fill. It's kind of like creating a solid, but it's just a different method of creating a solid fill in your composition. The next one is the fractal. Fractal is going to do what you would think that it would do. It's going to apply a fractal. All kinds of different ways that you can alter the fractal. As you can see, there's different types of fractals. We can alter the equation of the fractal, and this is going to just create a fractal type of shape on top of whatever layer you place it on. As you can see, you have a lot of ways in which to alter the fractal. You can change the color of it. All these things are animatable. Probably the best bet is just to apply this to your project and then start to experiment around with it. But if you needed some sort of like fractal background, you could easily create this using this sort of effect. The gradient ramp simply creates a gradient, and you have a lot of ways in which to adjust the gradient, adjusting the colors and how it's going to fill the particular object. Grid simply creates a grid overlay, and then you can come in here and you can adjust the size of the grid. You can adjust the width settings. You can adjust the border width of the grid. So depending on what type of look that you want, you can control the color of the border. And this clearly is an interesting way that you can combine different sorts of layers within your project. Next, we have the lens flare, and the lens flare just creates a traditional lens flare. You can adjust the center point of the lens flare, the brightness of the lens flare. You have different sorts of lens flares that you can add into your projects. And again, you can animate any of these settings. If we use the paint bucket, this is a way that you can sample different parts of your underlying image, and it will apply a paint type of effect. This video file probably is not the best because it's kind of monochromatic. It's not going to work so well, but if you did have a video or an image with high contrast, you could fill a certain area. The radio waves setting is kind of interesting. It actually creates concentric circles, and again, all of these things are things that you can animate. You can control the wave type. You have a different types of waves that you can make if you wanted them more square or polygon. You can even create your own mask, which would require that you create a mask and then select that. You can adjust the number of sides for the square. You can adjust the curviness and the curvy size. This is going to work on the polygon settings. For the wave motion, you can affect the frequency, the expansion, the direction, orientation, the velocity, and the velocity kind of makes some cool types of settings. You can see as I adjust this down, I get some really cool effects. You can animate the lifespan of this, which is going to have the radio waves fade out over time, the color, the opacity, all sorts of different settings. So this is kind of a fun one that you can incorporate into your projects. Scribble is one that works really well with masks. I will show you that one separately. Stroke is a way that you can apply an outline to a mask or a shape layer. Vegas is going to create light trails around the edge of the objects in a video. So let's go to our video layer and we'll put the Vegas on there. And you can see that it adds a little bit of color. And if we go ahead and play, it's going to take a second just to render out, but it does create these light trails around the edges of various elements on my video. So if we just play this short little rendered portion, you can kind of see where we have these little yellow trails that are going to appear within my video. Let's take a look at how we can make text appear. There's several ways that we can do this, but I'm going to start off by just writing some text on my screen. I'll just write hi to keep this short and simple, and I'm going to increase the size of my text a little bit. Then I'll go ahead and use my align palette just to center the text in the middle of my composition. And it is worth mentioning that this sort of effect works great with a script type of effect. I think it looks a little bit better with something that looks more handwritten rather than something that doesn't. Once we have the text on our stage, we can use a number of the effects that are located in Generate. The ones that work best for this effect are going to be Write On and the Stroke effect. I'm going to just demonstrate this using Stroke. With the high text selected, I'm going to drag my stroke effect to it, and you can see that it's going to apply this. In order to utilize this effect, we're going to need to use our pen tool and create a mask. So I'm going to use my pen tool, and I'm just going to go through and quickly create a mask that pretty much follows the lines of my text. In order for this effect to work, you're going to want to keep the mask lines, for the most part, in the middle of your text. And if you don't know how to use the pen tool, you're going to click to lay down points, and then when you want to make a curved type of shape, you're going to click, hold, and drag. And that drags out these Bezier handles. And we don't have to make this perfect, but we do want to kind of make the mask follow the shape of our text as much as possible. That's going to make this effect work a little bit better. I'll lay down my next point. If you want to break the handles at all and turn around their direction, you're going to hit your Option key or Alt key, and that will allow you to break the handles. I'll just go ahead and place this on here, and then I'm going to want to go back and just draw something on top of my little dot too, so we get the dot. So now I have my mask in place. You can see here's the mask. And what we're going to do for the path right here is we're going to choose mask 1. And we want the paint style to reveal the original image. If we select original image, and let's increase our brush size so we can actually see this. We want this to be thick enough so that we can see the underlying text. So I'm going to make this thick so it shows our text. Now, if we scrub through, nothing happens. What we're going to need to do is animate the ending keyframe. So I'm going to set a keyframe, and we'll put this at 0. The text is going to disappear. I'll just move out in time a little bit. So let's just move out about 2 seconds, and I'll increase the end value to 100. And now if we play our animation, you can see that the text is going to basically just write on to our composition and appear within the composition. So this is one way that we can make text appear. The write on effect works in a similar fashion. I'm just going to turn off stroke and get rid of that, and then we'll collapse this, and on our same text we're going to grab write on and drag it onto the text. With write on, we have this target, which is the brush position, so I can control where my brush is going to be, and that's what we're going to want to animate, the brush position. So with this particular effect, we're going to turn on keyframing, and then we're just going to move out, and this takes a little bit of time. I think the stroke method is a little bit quicker, but we're going to move out a couple frames, 1 or 2 frames, and you're just going to move this shape. I'm just going to be setting keyframes every few frames and dragging this particular point to whatever new location I want it to be in. And once again, for our paint style, we're going to want to click Reveal Original Image. If we go back to the beginning, and I'll just click away to deselect, you can see that it's going to write. Now, I didn't increase my brush size enough, so I need to make that bigger. If this is small, we'll get little dots, so we're going to want to make it fairly thick. And now if we play our animation once again, you can see how it just reveals the text. So both of those methods work really well on text if you want the text to be revealed. You can also use that on just about anything in your project. As I mentioned, I kind of feel like the stroke effect is a little bit easier and you have a little bit more control on it, but either one will allow you to create the illusion of text being written onto your projects. The final effect that I want to show you is the scribble effect. I am going to hide my high text for right now. I'll right click and create a new text layer. We'll simply type by, and I'm going to use my align palette to center this on my composition. Then what we're going to do in order to use the scribble effect is we're going to need to convert this to a mask. So I'm going to right click on the by layer, we'll go to create, and we'll create masks from text. This is going to create a new layer called by outlines, and if we open this up, you'll see how I have masks for these layers. I do have double masks for the B and the E since they have holes in them. What I will do is I'll go ahead and apply the scribble effect. So that is here in Generate. I'm going to drag this and apply it to the by outline layer. And as you can see, the scribble effect is going to fill just the first of the single mask, which is this first mask. And that is because our scribble effect is set to single mask. If we want it to include all masks, we're going to need to choose all masks. And now you can see that all the masks are being affected by this effect. Now this still isn't what we want, since we want to represent those holes in the various letters. If we use all masks using modes, this will allow the holes to be respected as we would want. And we have a lot of different options here. For the fill type, we can do inside as it is right now. We can do centered edge, which is going to apply the effect on the edge of the type. And if I zoom in, you can see this a little bit better. If we do inside edge, it's going to apply on the inside edge of the masks. We have outside edge, and that goes on the outside of the masks. And then we have left edge and right edge, which are going to look very similar to inside and outside. The difference is that left and right edge are meant for open paths, and inside and outside edge are meant for closed paths. I'll go ahead and set this back to center for right now. If we open edge options, these are things that would apply if you were using one of the edge settings. So you can control the edge width, and you can control how the lines are going to end. And these are the same settings that you're used to using when we're using lines in general. I'll set my fill type back to inside, and we have the option of changing the color. As you would expect, if we pick a new color, this is going to affect the color of the scribble. The opacity would control opacity. The angle is the angle in which the scribble is going to sit within the elements. The stroke width is going to be the width. If we crank this way up, you'll see that we almost get a filled shape. So if we want to see more of the scribble, we want to set this to a lower amount, possibly. And we do have some other options that we can use to control this as well. With the stroke options, we have a bunch of different settings. Curviness is going to make the stroke more loopy and rounded. And if we bring this down to 0, it will be more angular, so you can control those settings. The curviness variation is going to control how this is varied within your shapes. Spacing would control the spacing of the scribble, and spacing variation, of course, is going to vary that type of effect. If we use path overlap, this will extend past the edges of the path if you increase that value, or a negative value would bring it into the inner part of the element, and then we can vary that as well. When we use the start and end values, and I'll just zoom out a little bit so we can see everything, you'll see that if we adjust the end, we can control how the scribble is going to fill the particular elements. Let me just quickly open up my high and I'll see where my keyframes are. So the high is basically done writing on about 14 frames or so. So I'm just going to move out a little bit in time, and we'll just leave this on the stage till about 1 second. And this is where I want to create animation on this by outline. So I'm going to keyframe my ending point. I'll move out in time a little bit, and we will just increase this to 100. And if we go ahead and play this part of our animation, you can see how the text is going to appear. And it also is worth mentioning that the scribble effect is going to jiggle. It's going to wiggle and move by default. So that is the behavior of this particular effect. It does have movement associated with it. You can control the movement by adjusting the wiggle type. So we have a jumpy wiggle, which is a little bit more sporadic. So if we play that, we get slightly different animation. Static is no wiggle at all, and then smooth is what we saw before. You can control the number of wiggles per second by increasing or decreasing this value, and you can randomize that as well. As you can see, using the scribble effect will give you some interesting sorts of results. As you can see, there are all sorts of ways you can combine these sorts of effects. You can add different sorts of effects and stack them on top of your elements so that you can really create some unique sorts of animations using After Effects. And this really gives you some leverage to make some complexity into your animations that you'll be able to build rather quickly.